This is Rick Patterson. I'm here with Kim Sorrelle, and we're going to talk about some pretty cool stuff. So I'm pretty excited to be here. We've got a lot of cool stuff we're going to talk about. So thank you for tuning in. It's going to be a really great show.
Welcome to the show. I am so glad you're here. You're going to be so glad you're here. I'm Kim Sorrelle. I'm an author, speaker. I get to do a lot of fun things in life. My favorite thing to do by far is to meet people. And I get to meet some of the most extraordinary people that walk the face of this earth. And today I have Rick Patterson with me. He is a man who has worn a lot of hats in life. He's been a pastor, I've been in the business world, father, husband, many other things, author, speaker, you name it, he's done it. Probably jet ski rider, I don't know, but whatever it is, there's probably a lot of things. And he talks about shame, which is a real thing. I mean, it's something that probably most of us carry sometime in life. But he talks about it a whole different way. And we can get rid of it today, which I'm so excited about. And so we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about some other stuff. And so let's dive in. Rick, welcome to the show.
Well, I'm really happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
You bet. I'm so glad that you're here. And I am excited to talk about all the things that we're going to cover today. But I want to start out with you. And I want to start out with your story and who you are. So I want you to tell me about 8-year-old Rick.
Well, that's actually a great lead off because it's an 8-year-old Rick or 8-year-old any of us really that shame can take us a hold in our lives. It's at that sort of age. And that's where I found it beginning to take a hold of my life because 8-year-old Rick was very introverted, very shy, very introspective, very thoughtful. And by that, I don't mean kind. I mean, always thinking, always wondering. And what 8-year-old Rick discovered early in life was that that's no way to survive in this world. And I realized that if I was going to survive, I was going to have to change. I was going to have to become more outgoing. I was going to have to become more aggressive, more assertive, more alpha, if you will. And what happens when anybody but a young 8-year-old boy takes on that? They take on the understanding that there's something inherently bad about them and that they have to somehow figure out how to become something inherently good. And that installation of that idea that there's something inherently bad about you, that is the birthplace of shame. And so that early on is something I realized I had to deal with in order to become a good person, a productive person. So that's really where the whole journey for me actually began.
So what did that look like in your life?
The transition itself was a challenge because if you're going to actually kind of give up I mean, if you're basically an introverted person and you have to forego all that to become extroverted, it's a pretty traumatic experience. And but also, um, when you are somebody who's introspective in a world that doesn't care to introspect much anymore, it also means you have to sort of shelve that. You're sort of alone, and you find yourself completely alone. And that's where shame wants us. Shame wants us to find ourselves completely isolated and alone from people. So it takes its root in us that way too. But what I actually ended up finding out was that my theory was correct. If I could actually dispel with Rick, thoughtful, introverted, introspective Rick, and become outgoing, aggressive, opinionated, driven Rick, I could become successful. And in fact, that's exactly what happened. If you look at success in terms of material collection and things like that, and outcomes and results, I became that person. But what you realize is in order to become that person, you had to divest yourself of who you really are. And eventually, that's going to crack. It's going to break. And for me, it took the form of anger and depression. And I realized that I had to figure this out because I was becoming angrier and angrier. And all the accolades I was getting in life didn't actually belong to me, they belonged to somebody I fabricated. And so that's when I began to realize I got to figure this out.
Interesting. Why do you think at 8 years old, as a child, that you recognize that? Like, that seems like, I don't know, like of a huge revelation, like to think this is how I am, but this is how I need to be at a young age to recognize that. What prompted that, do you think?
A couple things. First off, what prompted it is the depression and anger were not manageable anymore. So then you've got to figure it out because I just can't live this way. But I think it's happening to all of us 8 years old. I think all of us at that age are trying to figure out, what do I have to dispel of myself, whatever it is, in order to fit in order to function in this world, in order to survive in this world. I think it's happening to all of us. I think the challenge is, to your point, we may not all see it. And so we're living it out different ways, in ways that are not helpful. They're hurtful, they're harmful. They're harmful to ourselves, they're harmful to our relationships. And that's why I call shame the hidden driver behind our destructive decisions, because for the most part, shame prefers we not figure this out, because then it can go on unannounced, driving our lives to places we prefer not to go.
Yeah, that's so interesting. You use the term fitting in, which is such a big deal to a kid, right? When you first realize that you don't fit in, or that, there are other kids that are popular, or, whatever term you want to use, right? And other kids that seem to have a lot of friends, and you have a lot of friends, and why don't you have friends? And yeah, I can see that. I've never really thought about that before. But you do start thinking about those things because you see that when you're a kid and you'll
Well, the
wonder,
challenge is, the
yeah,
challenge is we do it as adults.
yeah, right,
But
right.
we're just a little embarrassed to admit it as adults. When you get a guy like me, they're tough, right? I don't care what anybody thinks, as we say. I just don't give a shit. Whether they can think whatever they want, whatever, what I'm saying? They get all, but those are the people who actually care the most. And so even as adults, we're deeply invested in getting people's approval of us. And the more we complain we're not, the more we probably are. So it's interesting that, yes, in childhood is where it's formed, but the degree to which it manufactures itself in our decision making as adults is more dangerous, but no less prevalent.
Oh man, that's so true. I've got a good friend who talks about how you kind of lose yourself, or it's easy to lose yourself because you become who people tell you you are, or you become who you think you should be instead of who you're created to be. And, I always think, man, we're created in God's image, right? So, and God is love. John says that God is love. So must be we're love, and we're created in his image. And so when we sit there and go, well, I can't be me because I have to be this, or I have to be that, or I'm not fitting in, so I've got to change this about me or that about me. It's kind of like we're saying, God, you kind of made a mistake
You
here.
made a mistake.
Right?
You screwed this one up.
You screwed this one up. So if you could help me out a little bit. But getting back to that, how do you get back to a place where shame isn't a part of your life, or you're not trying to be something for other people?
I have to tell you, it is a battle. It is my daily battle. I wish that I could offer some quick tips, and some ways out of it. But the only thing I can really offer people is that it's an invitation to a daily moment by moment battle, to realize and to feel the sense when shame is rising up in you, trying to make your decisions for you, and choosing in that moment to make a different choice. Specific example, we all get them. I got one yesterday, right? The email at work. And suddenly you get this email, you feel attacked, right? And so when you feel attacked, that, by the way, is when shame is about to give you some suggestions.
Mm.
And your feelings get hurt. Now, a tough guy like me, I can't say my feelings are hurt, right? And so I'm too tough for that. But I get ticked off. By the way, that's when I get ticked off. That's tough, man. For you hurt my feelings. All right, translate that for you. But when we feel those things bubble up inside of us, shame is saying, "Hey, Rick, this person's attacking you. Rick, this person thinks you're bad. Hey, Rick, this person, and so you better fight back. You better defend yourself. You better attack. You know what I'm saying?" And some people say, "Oh, that person's right. I better shut up." And they just sort of shrink into the background like this. But in those moments when you feel attacked, when you feel your person is being attacked, that's when you have a moment to say, what choice would I make right now if shame were not handing me the script? Could I give could I give benefit of the doubt to the person who's attacking me? Could I see things? Could I give them empathy? They're having a terrible day. Could I say, you know what? It's not even me they're really attacking. It's something else. And when we do that sort of thing, we really disarm. In that moment, we disarm what shame is trying to do, and we end up with a really, really good outcomes a lot of times. So for me, it's dealing with the moment by moment decisions that allow us to bring love into the world, care into the world, empathy into the world, instead of adding anger, outrage, anxiety to the world, which is shame, what shame wants us to do.
Wow. Yeah, that's so interesting because we do. We've got a choice. That's our choice, how we take things, right? And what we do with them. Like we get to pick that. We might not get to pick what other people say to us, but we do get to choose how we take it in, how what it's going to do to us or mentally or whatever. If we're going to get angry, we're in that traffic jam and we're mad, or we're in that traffic jam listening to a podcast, whatever. We get to make those choices. And what a difference it would make if every time you sit back and go, well, wait a minute, let's think about this. How are they doing? Are they having a hard day? Did I do something that I could help them with? Is there something I need to do differently? Is there something, instead of going, I'm bad, so is there something, but say, it's okay. This is just happening, and how am I going to approach it? I love that. That makes so much sense. And so what do you do? Put a rubber band on your wrist and remind yourself to do that, or how do you make it a habit to think that way?
You know what I do a lot is I apologize a lot. I consider myself the foremost expert in apologies. Because what happens is you're absolutely right. We make mistakes, and I blow up on email. I choose the wrong path, and I. But to your point, guilt says we made a mistake. Shame says you are a mistake.
Mm.
And so when we make a mistake, shame says, see, that's proof. That's proof that you're an idiot. That's proof that you're a bad person. It's proof that you're, but guilt says, no, I just made a mistake. And then what we can do is we can own it. And maybe we don't have to own everybody's garbage out there, but we can say, you know what, to this person, I say this a lot. I made a mistake. I should not have reacted to you that way. And what I've learned, two things. One is that um, acknowledging the mistake is a tremendous, um, if you will, silver bullet to killing shame, because you're acknowledging I made a mistake, but you're not acknowledging therefore I am a mistake. And then what you're doing to another person, what I have found, you know how infrequently people apologize to people in this world? It never happens. And people all of a sudden say, they see apology as this, like this superpower. And it's like, oh my gosh, he apologized to me. It's so rare. And they hold you then in such high esteem just because you had the courage to apologize. And so I personally have found apologies as being the nuclear option to defeat shame in the world. Just admit what you did, apologize for it, don't own it, but then move on.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. Yeah, I can see where it would be a great diffuser, right? Like you're in the heat of a battle. I'm thinking about like my daughter just planned the senior all-nighter for my granddaughter. And there was a sponsor who didn't get their name on the back of the t-shirt. Somehow it was missed. And the sponsor wants their money back. Their kid was also a senior and wants their money back, threatening to sue. And we're not even talking that much money, like a lawyer would cost more money. But in choosing how to respond, it was, well, we gave your daughter this and we gave your daughter that, and she had a great time. And you were doing this for the kids, were you really doing it for you? Whatever, you could respond that way, but instead chose to respond with, gosh, we're so sorry. We're so sorry that it was missed. We sure didn't mean to miss it. We appreciate what you did. We're just a group of volunteers, and somehow we missed it. We shouldn't have. right? And that diffuses things. You can escalate things or you can diffuse them. You can do one or the other. And the apology, holy cow, I mean, it is a superpower. Those are, but mean it, right? I mean, you got to be sincere. But yeah, I love that. That's so good.
It's really a great example you just gave there because most likely the sponsor who was hurt that you didn't include them probably took it personally. That was probably shame. If I could hear the voice of shame in their own head saying right now, "Oh, they don't like you. They purposely set you apart. There's something about you." And so shame is telling them, informing them, you should be really angry here because they did this to you on purpose. And all that bad, and the reason that they believe it's possible is because they deep in their soul, they believe they're unlovable also. And so they just found proof in your mistake that what shame has been telling them all along is true, and then they explode. And so somehow, if we're also able to realize, we're all really fighting the same battle, we're all fighting the same enemy here. We're all fighting some inner sense of self-hatred that causes us to have to go off on people, you know? And if you're able to do precisely what you said, I'm really sorry. I think you're awesome. I just can't believe I did that. If you can own it, you can actually be a voice in their head that's opposite of what shame is saying. I really think you're awesome. I'm really sorry. I made a mistake and I'm really regretting it because you are so awesome. Suddenly, like, that's not what shame is telling me. But anyway, it's a great example.
Yeah, interesting. That's so interesting. Yeah, I've never really thought about that the voices that we fight in our head. But man, they're there all the time. And stemming from childhood, stemming from,
Stemming from
who
childhood.
told you what when, or whatever that you carry with you. And somehow you got to change that narrative in your mind to be one of self-hatred, or where do I fall short? What am I doing wrong? How am I screwing up? To, hey, I have value because I was created with value, like I'm good because I was created good, or whatever. But I could see where it's a tough narrative to change in your mind.
It really is. One of the things that I pivoted for me was when my wife and I adopted a sibling group of kids, and I realized at that point they were teenagers, that if I took everything personally that they did all the time, which I was doing, is completely destructive for a parent-child relationship. You cannot take personally what a child in your house is doing. But when people are shame-based, we take everything personally, and it just does not create a healthy relationship. So for me personally, that's when everything really was forced to change, was the adoption, because I realized if I didn't figure out what was making me so angry, if I didn't figure out why these triggers were always getting pulled, if I didn't figure out how to apologize to my own kids, then I was going to just completely destroy the relationship altogether.
That's a tough thing to do, Rick. Bring in teenagers into your home. That's tough. It's hard enough if they've been there since birth. That's hard enough to have those teenagers in your home, but to adopt a sibling group of 4 kids, right? Wasn't it 4 kids?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's so admirable and so hard, so hard. And I mean, I can't even imagine the struggles that would come with that, because they come with their own shame. They come
Yeah.
with all that baggage, everything that's led up until today, right? Until the moment they enter your home. And wow, what a thing to do. And so what did you learn? So you learned you needed to apologize. You learned that you needed to not take it personally. I think that's gigantic. Everybody hear that. Don't take it personally. Don't take it personally. Don't take it. I can tell you,
Yeah, keep saying it. Keep saying
yeah,
it.
no kidding, no kidding. I can tell you, as the mom of adult children, I am actually writing a book on all the things that my kids tell me I did wrong, how I screwed up, and what they would do differently. It's so fun to write because they hate it that I'm writing it, and I keep saying, "Well, then don't tell me I screwed up. It's all okay." But it's like, if I took it all personally, and I did for a while, it was so hurtful. Man, I questioned everything about my life. I questioned everything about my parenting. I wondered, my husband died several years ago. And so I didn't have him around going, no, Noah, that's not what happened. That's your 8-year-old mind remembering it that way, but that's not really what happened. Or, we're sorry, I apologize all the time, but so it's an interesting thing to deal with, but it made me question everything. And that's shame, I guess,
Yes,
right?
it is.
Yeah.
Yep, it absolutely is. Because deep in your soul, you've owned some place that says basically some version of you're really ugly, you're really bad. And so your proof is in how often you screwed up as a parent, you know? So this is just proving to you what you deep down inside kind of already believe about yourself. And it really is a horrifying thing to have to unpeel because um, A, we make mistakes when we parent. We screw up, right? But because we screw up doesn't mean we are a screw up. That's the link we have to break, you know? And I remember telling my kids, I said, if I teach you one thing in life, if I had to pick one thing to teach you, it would be how to apologize because you're going to make mistakes. And the ability to apologize simply says, I made a mistake. The mistake doesn't define me, and it's time to move on. And that one life skill, in my opinion, is bigger than any life skill we could possibly manage. And it attacks the main attacker of our life, which is shame.
Wow. Wow. That's big. Okay, so I have a question for you. So sometimes when I apologize to Luke or Noah or, one of my kids, one of my 5 kids, um, they don't really accept it. Like they want to go on with the argument rather than just going, oh wow, she admits it, or she owns it. Sorry,
Now what do I do?
okay. Right. Like what else can I do? Or do I just let them vent some more? Or I mean, what happens in that moment?
That's a really good question. I think that everybody's carrying this voice of shame, right? And so there's also something about us as humans where we feel better the more we can make somebody else feel bad. And that's true of all of us. And for example, it's why we gossip, it's why we tear other people down because the more we can tear somebody else down, the better we can feel about ourselves.
Mm.
And it's a horrible thing to have to do. But one of the things that I realized in my own relationship with my kid, with all people, is that the worse they can make me look in their eyes, the better. They need to do it. There's something deep in their soul that needs to do it. So historically, when I've apologized, the difficult part is exactly what you're saying, to say, I just had nothing else to say. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that that's not enough for you. I'm sorry, but but that right there is where shame is challenging you personally. Kim, you don't own the rest of this. You do not have to prove these things. You do not have to prove your worth. You do not have to. You've apologized, and now it's time to just turn the page. And if they don't want to turn the page, you just have to move on. And we can't let the voices of others continue to be the voice of shame in our own head. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it really does. It's interesting the way you're putting that because it does. It makes a lot of sense because we don't control anybody but ourselves, right? So we can apologize, we can own it, we can whatever, we can not let it be a shame in our life, not say I'm bad, but the situation was bad. I own it. I'm sorry I did it, whatever. I'm sorry that I hurt you in any way, whatever the words. But you don't have any control over whether they accept your apology or not, or how they see your apology or not. It's you be sincere, and then you're being sincere. You're doing the right thing, but you don't
Yeah.
have any control over what happens on the other side. And so I guess the thing that you do control is not letting it get deeper in and wound you in such a way that it becomes shame.
Right. Well, I think what we're hoping we hear from anybody we apologize to, I think what we're hoping to hear is somebody say to us, "Oh, it's okay. You're not a bad person." We're looking for validation from them. And the fact of the matter is, for the most part, nobody in this world is going to validate us. We have to learn how to self-validate.
Mm.
We have to learn to do exactly what you said and said, "I am a child of God. This child of God screwed up, but I'm not a screw up." But the only person who can convince us of that is our own selves. You know, we can't be needing that from somebody we're apologizing to. We can't be needing it from our children. We can't be needing it from our spouse, our coworkers, our boss. We have to find that inside ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. That should be a t-shirt. I screw up, but I'm not a screw up. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. It's true. Like we do. I mean, nobody can do it for us. We gotta figure it out for ourselves. And yeah, very interesting. Yeah.
You know who taught me that was, ironically, a lady named Eve. You'll remember her from the Bible. And when I saw it, when Eve, the snake showed up to offer Eve the apple, right? And so what Eve saw, Eve said, the snake said, "You'll be like God," right? And so Eve looked at the apple, and the voice. I was telling a young woman in our work about this story of Adam and Eve, and I said, "What did you hear the snake say to Eve?" And the woman said to me, "The snake said, 'You're not enough, and you better fix it.'" And so that voice in our head says, "You're not enough, and you better fix it." That is going to lead to all kinds of bad choices. Anytime we are trying to fix, this sense in our life that we're not enough, we're about to make a mistake. And that's why I think, whether or not the story is literal or not, I don't know. But I think that's why the story is right in the beginning of the Bible to say, anytime you're being challenged to believe you're not enough, that somehow God made you wrong, just like you said at the beginning of the story, God made Eve just like God needed Eve. If God needed Eve to be like God, God would have made Eve that way. But he made Eve exactly the way he wanted Eve. And Eve thought, it's not right. I'm not enough. I got to fix this. And
Mm.
that's what we have to challenge in our own head to say, I do not need to fix this. It's exactly what God wanted.
Wow. Yeah. 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 That's so true. Yeah. That is exactly what was said is Eve, you are not enough. And it's so easy to think that about ourselves and because there's a whole lot of comparison that goes on in life, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And you know what's weird too is that there's a lot of people too who will try and convince me. They'll say, "Rick, you are enough. You are enough." And the fact of the matter is, Kim, I'm not enough. I'm human. We have to stop making being not enough a bad thing. It's not a bad thing to not be enough. It's not a bad thing to need people. It's not a bad thing to need help. It's not a bad thing to be because that's what makes us human. It's how we were created. We were created not enough. We were created to need each other. We were created to need God. And so the only way that that could happen is if we're not enough. So we got to quit making not enough a bad thing. It's a good thing.
Interesting. Interesting. I always find it interesting too when I read an article about somebody or a book about somebody, and it's somebody who's big and famous, and you'd look at them and go, wow, they've got everything and they've made it, right? Like they've climbed that mountain, they're at the top of it. And then they're saying in their book things like, wow, I really doubted myself. I really wondered if I wondered why would they elect me? Or, why do I get to do this? Like, who am I? And so I don't know if there's anybody in the world, maybe some major narcissistic somebody, I don't know, who looks in the mirror and goes, wow, everything about me is perfect, right?
And ironically, the narcissist is I will say, the biggest offender. I consider myself a recovering narcissist, by the way. And what I found out, especially through the adoption, is that narcissism is actually rooted in self hatred. We think narcissism is rooted in ego and self love, but it's not. It's rooted in the fact that we so hate ourselves that we have to project to the world that we are awesome, that we're undefeatable. So we project something to the world that we in our deep soul don't believe ourselves. And the more we self-hate, often the bigger a narcissist we can become. And so even narcissism, especially narcissism, which I was, am still, I'm recovering, right? Even that I know is driven by shame, is driven by self hatred, it's driven by a need to appear to be more than we actually are.
Wow. Wow. And I would think too, it goes back to the expectations that people put on us, right? Like I can see that with parents, the expectations that we put on our kids, that if they're, unrealistic, or they don't really fit that particular child, or whatever, to try to live up to those, you could carry a lot of shame if you feel like you're not living up to whoever's expecting whatever it is from you. And that could mess with your head. And
And the thing is, you're not going to live up. It's just life. And we just, especially when we're so uh, driven by shame, it's so difficult to simply acknowledge that, that we're simply not going to live up, that it's just life. And for me, especially parenting is such a great example because for me, I think all of these things we go through in life, especially parenting, is driven is its purpose is to drive in us an honest humility, right? An honest humility to say, I'm not enough. And it's okay. We got to get to the it's okay part. But one of the things that I realized as a parent, especially adopting 4 all in a row, I realized I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm totally clueless. I'm a narcissist in a world that desperately needs empathy. I don't know what to do here. But that right there, I used to say, God sent me these kids to get me straightened out, to drive humility in me. Because in our culture, a lot of times, imagine this, right? A white guy adopts 4 black kids. That makes the white guy the hero. That makes the black kids the bad. You know what I'm saying? And so here's another white guy helping black people out, and that makes me. But it's the opposite. It isn't even true. And it continues to uh, 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 force uh, stereotypes in the world that white is the savior and black people need help. And what I keep preaching to people is no, this white guy needed help. And these black kids came in to mess me up, to tell me, dude, we're here, we're the humility committee, and we're here to bring you some humility. And they changed my life. Well, they triggered continual change in my life. But it was hard. It's hard because you're right. We absolutely, day in, day out, parenting or otherwise, we are faced with the idea that we're just screwing this up, you know?
Right, right,
I'm
right.
sorry, I went on a little rant there, but it's really kind of a big deal to me, these with the kids and what all kids are able to bring us to as parents if we allow it to happen.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think it's so true. I mean, like before I had kids, I think I was pretty put together, go to work, whatever, going like, I would shower, my hair would be done, makeup, and then I started having kids, and I walked around with a clump of something on my shoulder all the time. And so you can no longer be what you were before the kids come into your life. Like you have to change. If you don't change, you're going to drive yourself mad. Like you have to go with the flow of it. And I think, that's one of the things that I think is so cool about God, is that you can't outgive God. You can't outgive. So here you're this guy thinking, man, I'm going to help society by taking these kids, and I'm going to teach them the right way, and I'm going to, mold them and love them, and I'm going to give and pour out to them. And instead you end up receiving so much more than you can ever give, because God is just cool that way. You just
It is
cannot
very
give.
cool. But the thing is that, to your point, we have to be up for what God wants to do. Yeah, I think a lot of times, whether we're adoptive parents or biological parents, a lot of times we go into parenting thinking, I'm going to bring kid. I want kid. We say, I want kids. What we should say is, do I want a challenge to my life? Do I
Yeah.
want to learn humility? Am I going to receive what God has to do in my life through these kids? You know, but instead we oftentimes say, I want to help these kids. I want to make the world a better place. I want to have kids because I think it would just be fun. I want to be kids because I think I'd be a great parent. And see, it's this stuff. If we go into a parenting with this sort of mindset, it's just going to totally destroy us. But if we go into the mindset of, I am going to do my best to raise these kids. And while I'm doing it, I am going to learn some things about myself where I could become a better person. And then we're ready to receive the gift that God has for us as parents, I think.
Yeah, yeah, because it's a big gift for sure. And it will humble you in a hurry. There's no doubt about it.
No
Yeah,
doubt about
yeah. I always say that I can't take responsibility for the good my kids do, because then if I do that, I have to take responsibility for the bad, right?
it.
And
That is so powerful. Absolutely.
yeah, because reality is kids make their own choices. Like you're not following them around making all their choices for them, and you don't want to. You want to raise kids that are able to make choices, that are able to decide between this and that, and have their own path and their own relationship with God, or their own discoveries, their own everything, because they are their own. They might have come from you. They might be yours. You've adopted them, you've raised them, you've whatever them, but they're still individuals who will make their own choices. And I've seen a lot of shame in parents when kids don't make good choices. And I don't know how to avoid that.
Because we see it, oftentimes it's seen as they are a reflection of us, right? And for me personally, my experiences when I adopted kids, I personally did not experience that because, you know, I they were who they were. They were clearly who they were when they came in my house. So I never had to, manage through that to the extent that maybe people with biological kids do. But to be sure, what every parent, adoptive or otherwise, I think needs to realize is exactly what you said. This is a human being, and this human being is its own life. It's going to be a basket of its own decisions, and the best you can do is try to model for them what a human being, in my opinion, what a human being not driven by shame looks like, and that in itself is a challenge. It's somebody who learns. It's somebody who makes mistakes. It's somebody who takes correction, even as an adult, especially as an adult, takes correction, even from kids, and but I think if we can model that for our kids of what a grown adult should look like, which means failing, which means humility, which means standing up for ourselves when we say, my mistakes don't define me, because then they can see, then they're given permission that their mistakes don't have to define them either, you know? So I think that's a challenge in parenting, period. You're exactly right, is that we take it personally as our own failures. But even then, sometimes they are our own failures. But when because we will fail, we're going to fail. But then we got to say, "Yep, I screwed that one up." One time I was walking across I'm sorry, I was walking across the field with my son. He did something over there, and I just snapped at him. You know what I'm saying? I started barking at him and whatever. And in the middle of this field, I stopped and I said, "You know what?" I said, "I have just given you a really good example of what not to do as an adult. And first, I want to apologize to you for talking to you that way. Nobody deserves to be talked to that way, period. And my fear is, still talking to my son, is that you will now think it's okay to do this. And I'm telling you, it's not. What I just did to you is not okay. It's not okay to talk to somebody like this. I'm not even talking about what you did to get us here. what I just did is wrong. And so I hope that you can hear me say, this is wrong, so that you cannot take that with you into your adult life. You know, will he take it? It's very possible he will. It's sometimes that stuff is unchangeable. You know, once you put it in there, you can't take it back out, you know, and it affects people. But all I can do now is say, I'm sorry. That was me. God, I hope that you know what I'm saying? And to own it, but then move on.
Wow. And talk about a humble moment, right? Like to recognize that this is wrong. This isn't the way you should treat people. And then to admit it to your son, that takes your ego down a notch or two. Right? Okay, well, I guess I did screw up. And then to let them know. And because we want people to show us grace, right?
Yeah.
Like we screw up, man, we want that grace. So we've got to extend that grace to other people if we want that grace ourselves. And
Yes.
so I love that you told that story because you can do that. You can sort of reverse engineer what you just engineered and hope that it takes. And hopefully he remembers that moment as a teaching moment rather than that moment of being yelled at, right?
And he probably remembers both. I hope one is weighing more on his soul than the other, but you got what you got right now, and you have to move on. But
Right.
yes, I agree. I
Um,
remember one time I um, kind of went into another fit of rage. That's kind of my go-to problem, by the way, is rage. And I ended up breaking my hand, on a door. And because one of my daughters rolled her eyes at me. And
well, that's worth handbraking.
well,
That roll.
I thought so. It's funny because I'm like, that's on that's another for me that's a pivot moment for me. When I broke my hand, I thought, she rolled her eyes at you, dude. What the heck? Why does that? But that's a shame too, because when a teenage girl rolls her eyes at her dad, what she's saying to her dad is, you're an idiot. You
Yeah.
don't know what you're doing. You're totally lost here. You're stupid. And you know what? If I didn't believe that about myself, I wouldn't get so angry. And so in that moment, I thought, my teenage daughter, she's found out. I'm exposed. She knows the truth, and she's called me out on it. And when all that sort of mounts up, that's when I just blow. It's not because I'm mad at her. It's because she has discovered something about me I've been trying to hide. And that as a parent, I'm just lost, And so she called me an idiot. I broke my hand. And then I remember the conversation between my two daughters then. My one daughter, a little older, said, look what you made him do. You made him break his hand. And my younger daughter said, he's a grown man. I don't make his choices for him.
Ooh.
And I said, bravo. It sucked to hear that.
Right, right, right.
I want her to feel bad, Kim. I want her to feel bad that she made me so mad. But you know what? She's right. She's right. I don't make his choices. He's a grown man. He hit the wall himself. Good for her. Good for her.
Yeah, no kidding. Good for her. Yeah, it's a thing though. I did hear this recently though, for all of those people out there who have eye rolling teenagers, that if instead you look at it as, well, they heard you, they must have heard you, to roll their eyes. So that's better than not hearing anything from you, right? So I don't know, for what it's worth, at least they heard you. And so that's because yeah, girls, we're masters at rolling our eyes. I think that
Yes.
when we're created, I think there's a line that you go through, you get your color of your eyes, and then you go immediately into this other line that teaches you how to roll them. I mean, that's just what we do. We roll our eyes and we're good at it. And
Oh man, it's brutal.
it's
It's
louder
brutal.
than a lot of words. It's
Brutal.
one of the loudest things you can do is roll your eyes at somebody. But
I
yeah,
remember my
yeah.
kids also figured out, because I remember they were talking separately from this, and when one of them got in trouble, the one would tell the other one, they would say, just go apologize to him, and then he'll let it go. And they began to manipulate the apology. So, but here's what I thought. I said, okay, so they're playing me. That's fine. They're 12 years old. If they come and apologize, I'm going to let it go, whatever it is. Even if they're not sincere in their apology, why would I do that? For two reasons. It teaches them to apologize, but it also teaches them about what I believe God does, right? Is that God, in my opinion, absolves all kinds of stuff we screw up with simply, I'm sorry, you know? And I
Mhm.
thought, if my kids, even if they get away with it, even if they know they're manipulated, if I can teach my kids just to say I'm sorry, I have taught them a life skill that they will take on forever. I have taught them something that will matter more to them in life than anything else I could ever teach them.
Mm. Wow. Yeah, so true. That's so true. You know, I did this year, figuring out the true meaning of love. I dedicated a year to it. And honestly, if I go out to dinner, I have a hard time committing to an entree. So committing a year to something was a really big deal for me. But I did it. I was in Haiti most of the time. And I used 1 Corinthians 13, love is patient, love is kind, does not envy, does not boast, etc. And one of the things that I took one word or phrase a month, there was 14, so it took me a little longer than a year. But one of the things that it says in that beautiful poem in 1 Corinthians 13 about love is that love always trusts. Love always trusts. And when I was working on that, it was a struggle because I was like, well, how do you trust all the time? Like, what does that even mean? But it comes down to exactly what you said. If you take people at their word, they're going to want to prove themselves trustworthy. You don't have to try to read between the lines. You know, the minute you try to read between the lines or you try to figure out their motive or you try to figure out, you know, are they sincere? Are they not sincere? You know, what do they want? They just want me to say, okay, fine, go out with your friends, you know, whatever it is. The minute you do that, that's not love anymore, you know, because love just always trusts. And when you trust, if you think about it, if you think about the people in your life that trust you, man, you want to live up to that. You want to live up to that. Your wife trusts you. Man, you want to live up to that. You know, you're not going to go messing around because you want her to know that if you say you're at the grocery store, you're at the grocery store, right?
Yep.
So yeah, so it's again, God is cool and love is cool that way that it happens. And so you're just the perfect example of that love always trusts. Just take them at their word and things happen and things don't happen good if you don't.
Yep. It's really, I appreciate you sharing that verse. I remember those were the thoughts in my own mind as I was raising my kids. I heard the passage, love is patient. And then I heard myself say, but Rick, you're not. Love is kind. But Rick, you're not. Love is, but Rick, you're not. And so the challenge for me out of parenting was, how do I become love? How do I become love to them? But also, this little sneaky part is, just because I fail to be patient does not mean I'm not love to them also, you know? But it challenged me. It challenged my shame based thinking. And it necessitated me to become a person who was allowed myself to screw up without defining myself as a screw up.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I love that. Again, it's on a t-shirt. It needs to be on a t-shirt because because it's so true. And becoming love to them. I love the way you put that because it's not loving them, but becoming love to them. Uh, because that's, you know, God is love. We're created in his image. It means we're love. So how do you walk it? How do you talk it? How do you become love to your kids? And that's the biggest thing that you can do. I think it's the biggest thing you can do is become love to them because love is all these things. And when you figure out what love is and what it's not, and you only walk into what it is, then you can't help but win, right?
You can't. If you go through that list that you just gave, patience, kindness, trust, all these things, if people ask me, hey, Rick, what kind of things could I do what kind of exercises could I do in order to become more effective at battling shame? I would say patience, kindness, graciousness, all of the things that are part of being love to the world. And if you look at that list, patience, kindness, mercy, all these things, what does the world need more right now than those things?
Mhm.
And the more we engage in those exercises, the more we are doing battle with shame in ourselves and in our world, even within each other.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. Wow, absolutely. That's so good. Man, you are a wise man. And I always think that the wisest people are the people who have lived. They're the people who have been through things and decided that whatever it is you go through, you're going to learn from it instead of just carry it as woe is me, but learn from it instead, right? I mean,
I
that's
got plenty of what was me in here too. So if you want some of that, I'll let it out.
well, fortunately for us, you've also done some learning from it. And so that's a good thing.
Fair enough.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah,
funny, isn't it? Because we all say that failure is the best teacher. We all know that, but we all hate failure. We all hate to fail. Yet we know it's the best path to getting us someplace good. So we all hate the path to getting us someplace good. I'm in the same boat.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's so true. It's so true. Failure, going through hard times, feeling like you're in the valley, nobody's around you, all those things that those are the learning moments. Those are the big moments that can make or break you, really.
Absolutely.
Right. Right.
Absolutely.
Change your life. So yeah, this is so good because shame is for real and we don't have to carry it. We can just get rid of it. But you also said it's not like there's some magic formula. You can't wave a magic wand. You can't sprinkle us with pixie dust and all of our shame is gone. And so it is a process. Um, so one of the things you talked about is kind of changing the narrative in your head that, I screwed up, but I'm not a screw up, right? Or maybe they're having a hard day and that's why they're lashing out at me or all those kind of things. But what else, like, are there mantras? Is there something we can remind ourselves of? Is there, I don't know, something, anything that people can do to, first of all, recognize when it's shame, I guess is important, and then not carry it and get rid of the old shame that's been hanging out for a while.
One of the things, Brene Brown, right? She's the queen of
Mhm.
shame.
Yeah.
And one of the things that she mentioned in one of her early books, which I locked onto, is understanding that it's a daily battle is in itself something we can do. And what I mean by that is we are geared, like when I fail, when I blew up at that colleague at work the other day, um, we think, I say to myself, I'm an expert in shame and I still blew it. You know what I'm saying? But if we allow ourselves to hear the truth of Brene Brown that said, Rick, it's a moment by moment battle. Every moment is a battle. We have to win the battle this moment. If we can allow us that bit of truth into our soul, then we're going to give ourselves a lot of break, a lot of leeway, a lot of latitude, and we're going to allow ourselves to fail with that colleague at work that I yelled at. You know what I'm saying? I'm not proud of it. I need to apologize. I did apologize. But in that failure, in and of itself, the failure leads to more humility. It leads to more growth. Failure is not the enemy here, right?
Right.
What we do with the failure, that's the enemy here. And so I think it's key to listen to Brene Brown on this subject, which is realize it's not going to be gone like that. That's a myth. That's a myth. You know what I'm saying? And it's not a helpful myth because then we think, even if we're in the battle, even if we're fighting it out, right? If it doesn't all of a sudden miraculously go away, shame will tell us that's because you suck.
Right.
Shame will say, you're not winning, you're not getting better, that's because you suck. And that's a lie. And we
Mhm.
cannot allow that lie into our lives.
Yeah. Yeah. So true. So true. One thing that I find interesting. So I was raised Catholic. And then I went to an Assembly of God church for 25 years. And then I went to a non-denominational church. And, whatever, I consider myself a Catholic, non-denominational, full gospel,
You're a world traveler.
whatever. So I love it that if I want to go to church, I can go to any church and I feel comfortable. I know when to kneel, when to stand. People can be intimidated by the Catholic Church. And so I love that aspect of it. Uh, but I've seen hurt in the church. I've seen they talk about Catholic guilt, and that's a for real thing. I mean, which guilt, shame, maybe it's actually Catholic shame, not Catholic guilt, perhaps, right? But I've seen hurt, and which is so sad, because the place that you go that you think you're going to get filled, and that it's going to be a place of love and kindness and protection and whatever. Some places are like that, and it's so good, and people are getting so much out of it and loving on each other. But there's other people I know, people that have really been hurt by the church, and not the church as a whole, but certain churches, I guess. There's certain pastors are on, and whatever it would be. But what do you say about that?
The first thing I say to when people talk to me about that is, I'm sorry. And the reason I say that is because I was part of the problem. And I recognize that about myself is I was an atheist, and I became later in life as an adult an evangelical Christian. And I bought into a lot of the shame based exceptionalism, a lot of the shame based exclusion things that I saw going on. And the reason I did all that is because I needed to think well of myself. I needed to feel good about myself. I needed to think that God was pleased with me, and God was more pleased with me than other people. You know what I'm saying? And I began to own all this. And the reason I owned this message, this language that I was absorbing from the evangelical church is because I needed to, because I was so full of my own self-hatred and doubt. I needed to make sure God was good with me. And what I ended up doing is I ended up becoming part of the problem. And I think what I say to those people, once I say, I'm sorry that I was part of that problem. The other thing I say to those people that have been hurt by the church is this, is that the person of Jesus Christ is not those things. The person of Jesus Christ welcomed, radically, was radically inclusive of all the people, frankly, the church hated. He was radically inclusive of everybody who was poor, broken, and he was radically inclusive of of the sinner, especially the sinner. The dirtier you were, the more he loved you. You know what I'm saying? And this is the person of Jesus Christ. This is the person I more and more want to tell people about, because my fear is that that message is getting lost. And I feel compelled to have to tell people that the person of Jesus Christ is not those experiences. It's just different. He's got a wonderful message, a fantastic message of inclusion, of regardless of where you've been or who you are. And I'm sorry that I was not always that voice to people at the time.
Wow, wow, yeah, yeah, that's so good. Yeah, inclusion. That's a thing, man. I mean, there can be a checklist at the door, right? If you're this, welcome, come on in. We welcome you with open arms. If you're this, find a new place to go, because you're not welcome here. And I always think anytime anybody puts somebody else down, it elevates you. You're doing it to elevate you when you put somebody else down beneath you. And the reality is, we're all walking on the same earth, and we are all equal. Nobody better than the next, nobody above the next. There's not a staircase and you're on stair number 3 or you're on stair number 7. No, we're all on stair number 1. We are all at the base, right? And so I just think there are so many things we don't know. I think God is so much bigger than we can fathom.
I hope so.
Wow, right? Right. And I
So.
think there's so many things that we don't know. And sometimes people talk in such definitives, like, well, the Bible says this, and this is exactly what it means. Well, maybe, but 100 years ago, they would say the Bible says this, and this is exactly what it means. And today we say the Bible says this, and it means something entirely different.
Yep.
So anytime you talk in real definitives and think you know all the answers, man, I think that's just a slippery slope. I think it's dangerous, especially when people are hurt by it. especially when it puts people down.
Yeah, I studied the book of Matthew when I was getting my doctoral degree, and I saw exactly what you're talking about. In fact, I would say I saw it in reverse. And what I mean by that is in the book of Matthew, I saw Jesus intentionally picking the lowest people to say, these are the best people. And he was doing it on purpose, like to just to mess with us, and say, you don't get it. The least shall be the greatest. The greatest shall be the least. And then he gave us specific examples. The Good Samaritan, we make him a hero today. But at the time Jesus was using the example of the Good Samaritan, he was the most hated person on earth. And he said to the church of his day, he said, okay, so who is actually who is actually the person here that you need to follow, to emulate? And so Jesus took the lowest people and said, you need to be like them. And we got to get our mind around that. You know, Magi are another good example where they're the first people Jesus calls to worship him, the Magi. And we say that they're wise men and kings and things like that. But we don't realize in Matthew's time, Magi were in the same book of Leviticus, were equal with all the other people we dislike. They're equal with homosexuals. They're equal with sorcerers. They're equal. In fact, they were sorcerers. That's how the word is translated. They were following a star. So what we don't realize is in the very first people Jesus called, he called the sinners of the sinners, and he called them through a star. I say it's almost the equivalent of, today's world calling homosexuals to them through a gay pride flag. That's what he was doing, to say, not only do I radically include you, but I'm calling you first. And we got to get our mind around that if we're going to get our mind around Jesus.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. What a great point. I think it's so true. I think that's, part of the issue too, right? Is that we put people in categories that we decide is wrong, right? We decide, right? Like Jesus recognized how people thought in that time and who they thought were bad, and instead said, no, there's nothing wrong with these people. They're created to be who I created them to be. Let people be who they're created to be, and put the labels and the things aside. I mean, they're human beings, and stop naming things sin, for goodness sake. I mean,
The dude blew up all categories. He just came in and said, okay, I'm blowing them all up.
right, because by the way, we're supposed to love everybody. And by the way, we're created to be who we're created to be. And just as we want the freedom to be who we're created to be, we have to give that freedom to other people and let them be who they believe they're created to be without judgment, man. And yeah, it's true. I mean, Jesus was the great example, like an example that we should be emulating, instead of the opposite of that and saying, oh, that's sin, and oh, you're a sinner. And no, 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 read a little deeper, go a little deeper, people, because
Go deeper. Read the actual book. Go read it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, oh my gosh, this has been so good. And we're actually past time. I could talk to you for hours and hours and hours. This was the fastest hour of my life. I think this was so good. And you have given so much wisdom to people, and so much great information. How can people follow you, get in touch with you, buy your stuff? What do you want to tell people?
Well, the easiest way to do it is Rick Patterson Connects. And that's my website. And that'll take you to whatever I'm doing. YouTube is my other primary channel. And so the Rick Patterson Connects, you can also find me on YouTube. So if you just type in Rick Patterson Connects, you'll probably find a way to figure out where I'm at.
All right. Well, great. That's great. You've got some books out there. You've got some other wisdom you share. And so follow Rick. Everybody follow Rick. I'm telling you, you can learn a lot from this man. And I appreciate you so much. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you for everything for today. Thank you for all you do in life. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. I hope you got as much out of it as I did. And until we see each other again, I just pray that your heart stays open and you live your love loud.